I wish I had the budget for that many lights. I should probably put a warning, like epileptic warning on this. She gets her own elevator? That jacket gives me Neo vibes from The Matrix. She got the white gloves too. Wow. When you're this big of an act, you get basically to pick the most high-level, world-class musicians. And what that means is that stuff sounds real good. Specifically, listen how everybody is right in time. Even on the glissando, when those backup singers go down, they're all doing the glissando at the same time. This is something that people just don't appreciate. If not, there's a lot of band members here, a lot. You got the backup singers, the drummer, the guitar player. If any of them kind of are out of time, it begins to sound really muddy. If you ever tried to do overdubs and you had to move around WAV files, you know what I'm talking about. Oh, man. So when you have consonants, in between high notes, that becomes very difficult. In order to use your articulators, the lips, the teeth, the tip of the tongue, you have to not have your mouth real wide open. And generally speaking, when you're at notes this high, that's what you do. But she makes adjustments to achieve this. So the gliding on the pitch, emotion, that thing makes it a little bit easier on her to get to her articulators. So that the dynamics changing as well as the pitch slide downs help her to get to the articulators. I'm sure there's going to be someone in the comments who's going to say, like, no, she can just do that. What makes Mariah is that she knows exactly how to make these adjustments in almost every situation. And it's crazy. And then that little aspirate here at the end of Evans above. And what's noteworthy about that is that she'll actually, with that aspirate, it's very hard to change. When you're doing big, large notes, if your folds are really fattened together, it's really hard to change. It's easier from thin to fat, but fat to thin is much more difficult. And so what she does is she puts an aspirate, an H sound. And that way she can lower the volume of that. When you use an aspirate, you're blowing the folds open. So it gives you another opportunity to adduct them, put them together in the way that you want. And so in this case, she uses the aspirate to blow her folds open and then get to this thinner situation. And I love her. She's so good with mic technique. Any singer, any recording artist in the 90s were so good with mic technique. And I've from a lot of different people in the comments, I've heard like she's used different microphones for different situations. The reason why, like anyone who was recording during the analog period before digital overtook everything, you have to pretty much do everything on the way in. Everything that you do in post-production and analog involves manipulating literal tape. And so sometimes you cut the tape Like I think it's sort of, cutting a record, right? You cut tape because that's what you stored sound on. And so it was very, very important that labels picked up artists who could lay down music very quickly and limit the need for excessive post-production. So when we look at Mariah's mic technique, it's a level above what a lot of people who came later in the digital era would have had to learn. I've never been so satisfied. Look at these micro adjustments that she's making. Let me increase the size here so you can actually see it. I've never been so satisfied. That is very particular on that O there. What she's doing here is the opposite of what we see a lot of people when they use their low notes. So a lot of singers, not just Mariah, but Mariah does it a fair amount. When they do a run or when they do a phrase and they get to their low note, they'll purse their lips a little bit and then they'll get close to the microphone. The reason why they get close to the microphone is it bursts lower frequencies. For the people that are going to argue with me, it's time for science. This is a spectrogram. It will analyze the frequencies as well as how loud those frequencies are. So you can see the waveform up top here is way louder when I got close. But so too is this lower frequency brighter. The teal color being brighter and lighter means that it's louder. And you can see that for the first overtone and et cetera up. So it definitely boosts lower frequencies, right? This is called the proximity effect. Now, if we go back to the recording, the reason I bring this up is because she's actually avoiding that. Normally, people are utilizing it, but she's avoiding it. Right? She does O, and then she does the little run down, and she pulls the mic away. Another thing I love about her mic technique, and she was doing this when we were doing the Luther Vandross duet that they did. She can use the mic technique as like a volume knob thing, but the other thing that she does is really cool is the way that she'll fade off a phrase by like doing love, right? And she'll pull away the mic. So that doesn't require as much precision, but it's a really cool effect. Oh, man. So one of these days I'm going to plug in my dynamic microphone. What is closer to the microphone will bias what frequencies are heard. Not all frequencies. So here, I'll just show you. Again, power of science. I need to add a transition there. So if I record, watch what happens when I move my mouth. I'll hit it at the same volume, and I'm going to move my mouth and put my nose in front of it. You see how these higher frequencies became more pronounced? You can literally see it. Yes, in the beginning here, you have some, but they're not as consistent, nor are they as loud. So what you put in front of the microphone changes your tone. The reason I bring this up is because that's what she's doing. So right now, it's between her upper lip and her nose. And then she brings it down to be an inch in front of her lip, bottom lip, which is the most common mic placement. Now, this is what's cool about her when she does runs. I am not impressed with speed of runs. I personally have never had to practice doing runs. It was just something I did. It was always nothing I ever had to work for. But this is not just a run. This is a belt into a run, and I'll explain why that's significant after we play it one more time. A belt is a tilting of what's called the cricoid cartilage. It is at the base of the neck. It's much lower, right? So here's the thyroid, is that the protrusion of the Adam's apple, right? The cricoid is lower. The significance of the cricoid cartilage is that when you tilt it, the folds get super fat. Now that's the opposite of what you want when you do a run. So, because you want the folds to be thin, because thin folds move faster. So what she does is she tilts and untilts very quickly. You hear the volume difference. It's hard with the compression, but like belting sounds like a particular thing, right? So you can hear the belt and you can hear the volume adjustment and the run down. That I'm impressed with, because it means that when you do a run, you have to understand where you are in the meter. So if you do, no one cares, right? But if you're doing, like, and you start adding the rhythm in there, it makes more of an arc and more of a musical phrase or journey. And so what she's doing is she's using the belts to punctuate the beginning of the meter, the strong beat of the meter, and then fades off using the run. Like if you tap your foot to that, she's right on the strong beat or on the off beat, depending on when she's singing. She does both, but it's right in time. So she's belting and giving the bright vowels on the off beat, and it's right on the off beat. So not only does she have to tilt her cricoid cartilage to get to the belt, and then untilt it to get to the run, she has to do it in time. That's impressive to me. And I love here, gorgeous phrase, continuous breath pressure, just super consistent breath. Then she changes it. She's using a lot of glottals. Folds are closed fully, and then you kind of make them open by putting air through them, and it's a rhythmic thing. It's a way of introducing an attack, a beginning of a note on a vowel when you don't have a consonant in front of it. Oh, God, that's ridiculous. It would be enough that she does whistles, but she does it like as a phrase. She uses it to phrase musically. If you were a flautist or a pianist or whatever, like who has like this really high range, and you weren't doing like the vocal equivalent of a whistle register, this would musically make sense. There's a lot of music that slides up like this, and in particular, notice how the vowel isn't bright when she's on the whistle. The vowel's like a schwa or an umlaut. And the reason I'm pointing that out is this is what opera singers do when they phrase, particularly tenors. This is my domain. So if I'm doing an aria and I do, let me get my piano out. If I do disbalness, that's jarring. If I just go dispal, right, that's not a good sound, or at least it's disconnected. It's not a musical phrase. So I don't use a bright vowel on this. I could if it were the dramatic apex of a phrase, but it's not. So what I'm going to do instead is right? I'm going to dome my soft palate a little bit to make it less abrupt and jarring. So the same concept applies here, but like 1,000 times harder. So she's drooping her soft palate, changing the vowel in order for the whistle register note to sound like it's part of a phrase. That's silly. That's insanity. Ooh, okay, low notes. I'm actually surprised that sounds so lush. She might, I think she's lowering her larynx to achieve that. The reason why I'm pausing, and I think that's peculiar, is because the vowel, whenever you retract your lips, or smile is another word for that, you're generally highlighting higher frequencies. And we can prove this again with the power of science. Right? So, very, very noticeable change in the brightness of the sound, aka how many higher frequencies there are. So when I'm looking at this and I see her retracting her lips, I'm a tiny bit confused. It's very, very low. So I think she's lowering her larynx, and I hate to say this out loud because I don't want people to do it, because people abuse it and it's a common misunderstanding. She might be pulling her tongue back. She might be. Cannot confirm. Probably not a good idea to do. This would be the first time I've ever seen Mariah Carey do it. I do not advise. There's some teachers like, oh, make it sound like an opera singer. It makes it sound like you have your tongue back in your throat and like you have a sock back in your throat. You're literally closing off your throat with pushing your tongue down. Yes, there are people who can do it, but it's not ergonomic, and I don't advocate for it. But she might be doing it here. She's so good. She's a gymnast with her larynx. There's like, more than any other singer, I can, like if I'm doing Whitney, like I can pause and show how she's phrasing the words and using the words and making decisions based off of that. And there are singers who do their own thing and add a lot of details to the performance. But with Mariah, it's like, really? Like every phrase has a few things going on that's really interesting. That flip in time, right? So the second part of that phrase, where higher than the heavens above, it's an easier way to go about hitting the high notes. When you put an aspirate and you blow your folds open, it's easier to make it's still hard, but it's easier to make an adjustment and gradually put your folds together. Where I'm losing my mind is this. She starts with a glottal on a high note. So a glottal is your folds are closed, as in you might be holding your breath. And then she opens them. And the reason why this is significant is she has to open them right away on the belt. So she's tilting the cricoid cartilage, which makes the folds fat, and she's closing them and then opening to the E vowel. And the reason why this is significant is that pressure builds up when you do a glottal. So the more pressure you have behind thick, fat folds in a belt, the worse. It's very difficult. At best, you'll go flat if you mess it up. At worst, you can actually do damage. She's not going flat. This is insane precision. That. Emotions. Right? E. That's silly. That's a glottal. And it's just brilliant. And it makes sense phrasing-wise, too. It just musically makes sense. This is the thing with Mariah, is every phrase she's doing something. Yes, it's technique and technical, but it's for the sake of the phrase. She's so specific, phrase by phrase. This tune is very rhythmic heavy. It's very pop. And people who say like it's like she does a lot of R&B. To me, R&B in the 90s was pop because I was there for it and I don't look it, but she's not punching her consonants. It's so tempting when you do something pop like this, and the percussion and the percussive elements of the music are very important. If you think of like someone like Michael Jackson, like Billie Jean is with the punching of the consonants, it does follow the aesthetic of the music, but she's not punching the consonants here. And part of the reason why she's not punching the consonants is that if you punch consonants too hard, you're putting a lot of breath pressure behind them, and that jeopardizes your ability to go up. But even with that challenge, she's still respecting the meter and how important it is. Like, you can definitely sense her strong choices, her strong rhythmic decisions here without using consonants. It's really cool. And part of the way she's doing that is with runs. Oh my God, it's preposterous. Look at how it's not just the whistle. Look at how she adjusts the mic during the whistle. What that tells me is that she does so many whistles that she just knows where the microphone needs to be depending on where she is in her range. Like every singer that ever wanted to do a whistle, that's the mic drop. Because that's how comfortable she is. You know, you go to the singing subreddit and people are like, I hit a note, and they're proud of that. People think I'm like talking about one person. There's a lot of them in the singing subreddit, right? And meanwhile, Mariah is hitting gorgeous notes with the understanding of what to do with those notes as it translates to a microphone. It boggles my mind how quickly she just goes up to these belts. It boggles my mind because she's making belting sound like it's normal singing. And that it's not the epic, difficult thing that it is. Because it is hard. It's probably the hardest thing to do in singing, to do a healthy belt. It's not impressive when you screw it up. That's easy. You just, make your vocal folds literally bleed. That's what will happen if you mess with it too much. And she's just leaping up to them. And the reason why this is impressive is that if you're singing a phrase, you can only bring as much vocal weight, enough fatness to the folds as you can in the highest note of the phrase. So if I'm singing this note, the B, I basically, if I'm training this, I would sing the B first, slide down, and then slide back up, octave slides. Right? That's a very common exercise. And the reason it's a common exercise is because it's very effective. You're referencing your highest note in the phrase, and then you're finding out what you can get away with in the bottom and still make it back up to the high note. That is difficult. Like, people train that specific exercise when a high note comes up in a song, like a particularly difficult note in a particular song, and they'll train that as part of the phrase. She's doing it everywhere. She's everywhere with this, just popping up to belts. That's a belt. Casually and elegantly phrased. It sounds connected to the rest of her register. That takes work. It's like I showed you with a simple aria example where versus like. There's a video of Pavarotti on YouTube, And he's like, that sounds simple, but it takes 10 years to learn something like that. And he's not wrong. It took me 10 years to learn that. Connecting registers is not just a matter of breath control, it also has to do with vowels. And the fact that she so comfortably will suddenly tilt her cricoid cartilage, which instantly fattens up the folds, and she makes it sound like an even scale, that's really hard. It's really hard. Try to think of other singers that you know of who enter a belt and it's like part of the musical phrase and it's not a jarring epic thing. She can do that, but she doesn't because she's got taste. I've been working on my singing. I've been practicing more than usual because I'm blessed enough to make a living talking about singers and I have time to practice. And then I listen to that. And I'm like, well, I have other redeeming qualities. She's 3 minutes and 43 seconds into an hour and a half performance. Why do I bring this up? If her belts were not clean, and I mean super clean, that's draining. That's draining. As the pressure builds up on these thick folds and they oscillate, if it's even a little inefficient, a little too much breath, they really come together very harsh. It's usually not a good idea to belt for an entire set, for an hour and a half set. The confidence and ability to pull this off, where she starts like this and presumably ends very strong, is precise. It's precise. And this goes back to the whole thing of, the singing subreddit joke where they go like, hit the note. She hits it clean in a variety of different ways, on a variety of different vowels. What's impressive isn't that she does it. What's impressive is that she does it so well. These runs these runs based off like it's not the rate of the note. It's not how many notes she throws in it. I don't care. It's how quickly she gets off of the cricoid tilt. This is a really good idea to do in your low. You can totally steal this idea. It's not a new one, but it's a really cool one. When you want to sound warmer in your lows, the drooping soft palate thing we talked about is actually really nice if you're staying in your low for a decent amount of time and also have a microphone. If you're unamplified, this is not a good idea because no one's going to hear you. But like as a tenor or as a higher voice, if you're doing this without a microphone, you're not going to really be heard. But if you have a microphone, this gives this warm, sumptuous sort of sound to your voice to droop your soft palate in the low. Like her soft palate is high throughout that entire thing. Has to be. Well, not has to, it's easier. Her soft palate's drooped here, and listen to the tone difference. That's actually a really good phrase right there. I really like this one. Listen how specific every note is. So there's a concept in when we're talking about audio stuff, attack, sustain, decay. One of the really, really important elements of doing a vocal run is that your attack is very clear and very clean, because otherwise it sounds like mush. So each note needs its own attack. It's very hard to do without consonants, but she does it here. And it sounds great. Like, this is how you make runs sound good, right? Is you put them in meter and you emphasize the strong beats. It's really cool. I really love when she does that. She does it everywhere. She always makes her runs count. I miss music like this. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like I'm an old fogey. But this is fun. Remember when this would play in like roller rinks? Anyone in shamefully in their 30s with me? Yeah. Hey Mariah. Can you do whistle notes? What specific whistle notes can you do? Why are you answering yes? To all of them. Okay.